Wendy did say that the Libertarian Party started in 1972. I think that was the first federal election. Should I keep the thing close or far?
Close.
Close. Is this better? Okay. I ran for New York State Assembly in 1968. So we had, before the federal party started, we had some state parties, and I ran for Assembly of New York State, and my motto was block for disassembly. Trying to disassemble them. What I'm going to do, under orders from Wendy, and she's a tough gal, so I have to listen to what she says, is I'm going to give a little background about me personally, how I became a libertarian. Then I'm going to say what libertarianism is the way I see it. Although, you know, when you get 10 libertarians in a room and you ask them, you'll get 11 views as to what libertarianism is. 12, okay, I stand corrected. And then I will discuss 3 issues that Wendy asked me to talk about. Education, healthcare, and guns, Second Amendment, and then have a 5 or 7 minute question period, discussion period. And if the food comes while I'm here, I think food first, me second, so we'll see what happens. I'm Jewish, I was brought up in Brooklyn, and as Murray Rothbard says, in his family, the big dispute was between those who were outright commies and wanted to have the communist card, and those who were just sort of moderate commies and didn't want to carry the card but were, you know, socialists. My family was similar. So I was sort of, you know, a pinko because, you know, everyone else was a pinko, so, you know, I didn't think about it much, and I just sort of, I was interested in girls or so, you know, I was 15 or 16, and, you know, I became a pinko like everyone else. And I was at Brooklyn College, and I was still pink as you can be. And Ayn Rand came to lecture at Brooklyn College, and I came to boo and hiss her because she favored free enterprise. And you know, everyone knows free enterprise is disgusting. It's despicable, creates poverty, it's unjust, it violates rights, the whole bit. So I booed and hissed. And at the end of the session, they said the Ayn Rand Study Club that had invited her to Brooklyn College was now going to have a luncheon in her honor, and anyone could come, even if you disagreed. And I hadn't had enough booing and hissing yet, so I came, and there was this long, long table, maybe 50 people on a side, and Ayn Rand was at the head of it, and Nathaniel Branden was next to her, and Leonard Peikoff, and Alan Greenspan. This is before he was head of the Fed. And I was relegated to the foot of the table, maybe 100 feet away. And I turned to my neighbor and I said, you know, what's this capitalism? It's all wrong. Socialism is the way to go. And he said, well, I don't really know that much about it, but the people who do are at the other end of the table. So I went and I put my head in between Ayn Rand's and Nathaniel Branden's. And I said, there's a socialist here who wants to debate someone on socialism and capitalism. And they said, who is it? And I said, me. And I was, you know, 20 years old. I guess I was a senior in college. I was a pushy chutzpahnik in those days. Still am, but, you know, them are days. And Branden, her chief lieutenant, was very kind and gracious. And he said, well, I'll do it under 2 conditions. I'll come to the other end of the table where there's room and we'll talk. The 2 conditions are, 1, you don't allow the conversation to lapse with this one discussion, but we continue until, you know, we get it settled. And the other is you read 2 books that I'll recommend. The 2 books were, 1, Atlas Shrugged, and the other, Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And those 2 books, and maybe 4 or 5 discussions in Ayn Rand's house, in Nathaniel Branden's apartment, they were near the Empire State Building then. And I was converted. I was then a libertarian, a minarchist libertarian, a limited government libertarian. And I sort of went to the NBI Institute, the Nathaniel Branden Institute, but it was sort of a little cultish because you could ask a good question, a softball question like, Miss Rand, on, you know, page 452 you said this, could you elaborate? But if you said, well, on page 452 you said this, and on page 302 you said that, and there's a little inconsistency, she'd say, get out. Which, you know, didn't seem to be very amenable. So I was sort of flitting on the edges of libertarianism. And then I met Murray Rothbard, who converted me to anarcho-capitalism in about 10 minutes and Austrian economics in about 2 years. And I met Ludwig von Mises, and I shook his hand. So if you shake my hand, I never washed it since I shook his hand. So it's a little dirty, but if you shake my hand, you channel Mises through me. So one of my claims to fame. Let me give you the scorecard or the ballpark so you can tell the ball players from who's who? Well, the essence of libertarianism, as I see, and Wendy very aptly put it, the way I see it, it's sort of a two sides of one coin. On the one side is the non-aggression principle, NAP, non-aggression principle. Keep your goddamn mitts to yourself. Don't grab other people or their property, unless it's with their permission. So if you perverts are into sadomasochism, that's okay. You can grab each other. And if you go into a boxing match and somebody punches you in the jaw, you can't say, hey, that's aggression, because you've agreed to be aggressed against above the belt. No biting ears, but above the belt. The other is private property rights. Because suppose, what's your name?
It's Barrett.
Barrett? Suppose I go over and grab his hat. Am I a thief? Did I aggress against him? It all depends upon who's the rightful owner of that hat. If he stole it from me yesterday and I grab it, then he's the bad guy if he resists me. But as it happens, it's his hat, so if I were to grab it, I'm the bad guy. But we need a theory of property rights in order to determine whose hat it is. Because the way to determine this is based on property rights, whether it's aggression or not. And we start with ownership of the body. We each own our bodies. So rape or murder would be a violation of rights. And how do we get to own physical property? Oh, through homesteading. You mix your labor with the land. And then through any voluntary method. Because another synonym for libertarianism is voluntarism. Anything voluntary, anything that doesn't violate the non-aggression principle. So for example, I might have domesticated a cow and you cleared some land and grew corn. You own the corn, I own the milk, but now we trade. And now I own the corn even though I didn't produce it, and you own the milk even though you didn't produce that, but we can trace it back to original homesteading and voluntary trade. And other ways of voluntary interaction would be employment, lending, borrowing, gambling, whatever. And that's sort of the libertarian ideal. And the way I look at everything is through these libertarian glasses. If there's any question that comes up, abortion, the Fed, education, healthcare, whatever it is, I get my libertarian glasses on and I say, well, does it violate the libertarian non-aggression principle, and is it compatible with property rights, in which case it's compatible with libertarianism, and if not, not. I see the food is coming, so should I shut up or keep going? I'll keep going until everyone's got it, and then maybe I'll stop in the middle, and then we'll rev up and I'll come back. Okay, so who are the ball players? What's the view of the various sects or subgroups of libertarianism? Well, the one that I would say is a majority view, probably 85% of people, maybe 70% of people who call themselves libertarians are minarchists, minimal government libertarians. This is the view of Ayn Rand and roughly the view of Ron Paul, that yes, we should have a government, and the government has only one function, to protect persons and property of the citizens. And to that end, you only need 3 institutions. 1, armies, to keep foreign bad guys off of us, not to have 1,000 military bases all over the world and protect the borders of Afghanistan or Iraq or anything else like that, but just for defense, a very, very strong defense. We have the basketball team, the Pelicans. And, well, they're doing the best they can. But the point is, when you're there at the game and the other team's got the ball, what do they yell, the audience? Defense, defense. Namely, they can distinguish between defense and offense. And yet the Republicans say of us that we're not really for defense because we don't want to have imperialism all over the world, which is crazy. I mean, you can distinguish between offense and defense. We favor a strong defense, very strong defense. Anyone mess with us, we'll kick their butt. But we don't go around the world being the world's policeman. So that's one function of government. The other function of government, the second function of government is police. Keep local bad guys off of us, murderers, rapists, whatever. But no victimless crimes. In other words, if anything between consenting adults, sex, drugs, whatever, rock and roll or gambling, the police shouldn't be putting them in jail. And as Wendy said, we're an incarceration state. Most of the people in jail are there for victimless crimes, buying and selling drugs. We did this with alcohol. It was a disaster, and now we're doing it with drugs, and hopefully we're going the way of Washington State and Colorado, and I think it's Uruguay that's started in some countries in Europe. And the third function of government is courts, to determine who owns that hat, if we're having a dispute over the hat. And that's it. And I would say maybe 60–70% of libertarians believe in very, very limited government. You have to have a government, and it has to protect persons and property, armies, courts, and police. That's it. Then there's a group, Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, that would add a few more things beside armies, courts, and police. I would still consider them libertarians, even though they're sort of on the periphery ideologically, but they're still libertarians. They would add, I don't know, getting rid of mosquito kind of things, and maybe roads, although one of my books is, why we should privatize roads. So they would add more things, and maybe some sort of safety net under whatever it is, although the libertarians, the minarchists, would say, look, the way to cure poverty is to just have free enterprise. Instead of getting the government to create poverty, get them to stop it. And then if there's any problem, well, you have private charity. Let them to stop with the unions and stop with minimum wage and stop with central banking and stop creating poverty. And then most poverty will go away. And then the little poverty that we have, private charity. The third group of libertarians, and I would say maybe 3 or 4%, are anarcho-libertarians. I happen to be one of them, where even the functions of government, armies, courts, and police, we can privatize. And that would be a much more radical view, but this is not the majority view. The majority view, as I say, is a very limited government, but it's not an anarchist group, although there are some libertarian anarchists. Okay, so I've given my personal story. I've given what I think is libertarianism. Now let me try to apply it to, 3 or 4 or 5 things, and then call for questions and discussion. One of the things that I was asked to speak about was education in general, and in specific, this question of having universal, what do you call it, Wendy? Common core criteria for education. Well, from the libertarian point of view, if you take your eyeglasses, your libertarian eyeglasses, and look at education, it's just like bubble gum or wristwatches or shoes, private education. You want to send your kids to school, send them to school, and somebody will start a school. We'll have private schools. We never had public schools until 1890, 1910, and somehow the country survived with private schools. All the schools were private. We don't need any public schools. You want to send your kid to school, send them to school. Nowadays, what you have is this compulsory education for everybody. In the old days, what it was, you would become an apprentice. If you wanted to learn a skill, to be a blacksmith or a plumber or something, you go and study, work for somebody like that, and you learn the skill. Nowadays, what we do is we force everyone into this round peg, square hole kind of a thing, and they hate it, and you have problems with it. Ron Paul is in favor of homeschooling, but to me, homeschooling is sort of like do it yourself. Some people are good at carpentry and plumbing, and they do it themselves. Other people, something breaks, you call a plumber. From the libertarian point of view, both are compatible with libertarianism. Neither one violates the non-aggression principle. So we privatize all schools. And smart kids that are very poor always had scholarships from private schools, and there's no real problem. And there's no reason to push everyone through this round hole, square peg kind of a thing. What about, say it again, Wendy, I forgot, the Common Core? I'm not against Common Core. It depends upon, is it compulsory or not? Look, we have Common Cores in certain things. We have ounces, we have Fahrenheit, centigrade, that's Common Core, and people abuse it. So if you want to have a Common Core, fine. Just don't impose it on anyone. So I'm not against the Common Core per se, I'm just against imposing it on people that don't want to be dealing with a Common Core. So that would be sort of a quintessentially libertarian way of looking at it, whereas the way the Republicans might look at it saying, well, the Common Core is bad. Well, nothing wrong with the Common Core per se. Common Core per se doesn't violate rights, so from the libertarian point of view, that's okay. The next one is guns, the Second Amendment. The question is owning guns a per se violation of someone's rights? That's crazy. I mean, if you take someone and shoot somebody, an innocent person, well, then you're a bad guy. But just owning a gun and using it for protection or defense is perfectly legitimate. Well, what about the atom bomb? Should you be able to have an atom bomb in your basement? No, because the libertarian ideal of non-aggression principle is not only may you not aggress, but you may not threaten anyone either. And if you have an atom bomb in, next door to me, it's a bit of a threat. I'm not going to sleep too well. I did some article and I said, look, when and if we occupy Jupiter and everyone owns a 10,000 square miles, then you can have an atom bomb right in the middle of your own territory, and it's not per se a threat to anyone else. But apart from that, anyone should have any gun that they want, as long as they use it just for defense. There was this case in Kennesaw, Georgia, where there was a lot of rape. And what the people in Kennesaw, Georgia did, the founding fathers or the politicians, they had a compulsory gun ownership law. Now, libertarians don't favor that, but it's interesting what happened. And not only did you have to own a gun, but if you didn't know how to use it or clean it or use it safely, you had to take courses. And a lot of women didn't know guns as well, so you'd see women shooting at a berm, a big side of a mountain kind of a thing. And you'll never guess what happened to the rape rate. It's just an accident that, if I'm a rapist, I'm not going to Kennesaw, Georgia. Because, men are stronger than women on average. Men are bigger and fatter and stronger, and it's an unfair thing. But if a woman's got a gun, it's the great equalizer. They were having these take back the night marches at colleges, universities. The Olympics, the Winter Olympics is coming up, and one of the things in the Winter Olympics is you ski a little, you shoot a rifle, and you ski some more. And in the Summer Olympics, there's pistol shooting. Any college campus that wants to get a girls' rifle team or a girls' pistol team, not going to be any rapes there. And there's this guy, John Lott, L-O-T-T, what is it? I forget
More Guns, Less Crime.
More Guns, Less Crime, thanks. A magnificent book, and I'm sort of a fan of his. He's not a libertarian on every issue, but he's certainly a libertarian on that issue. Okay, so that's one. The second one was guns, education. The third one is healthcare. What's going on with healthcare? Why do we have such problems with healthcare? The main reason I think we have such problems with healthcare is that doctors are the strongest union in the country. Other unions, what a union is in the business of precluding or restricting entry to keep competition out. And they keep competition out. There are very few doctors, and the supply curve shifts to the left, if you want to use economic lingo, and in order to keep the prices up. And the reason that they give for occupational licensure is we've got to only have Cadillac doctors. We can't have anything other than the best. Well, suppose we had a rule that the only cars on the road could be Cadillac or better, Rolls-Royce, BMW, whatever. Would we as a society be better off? No, most of us would be walking, which is why you have these long lines to see a doctor. You want to see a doctor, you call now and they'll give you an appointment in April or something. We need more doctors, and if we had more doctors, the price of medicine would fall. And if the price of medicine fell, then we wouldn't need government to intervene. In other words, government is intervening based on a problem that they created in the first place. If they'd stop creating the problem, they wouldn't have to solve the problem. And I do a lot of research in Canada where they have a single payer system, and it's virtually for free. And it just means, let me tell you this story. There was a case in Saskatchewan, one of the provinces in Canada, where a woman and her horse both had some kidney stones. They both had kidney stones. And it took the woman a year and a half to get the operation for kidney stones. It took the horse 1 day, because it's cruelty to animals to not have a horse see a vet, because they don't have socialized veterinarian, but they have socialized medicine. In other words, we're treating dogs and cats and horses better than we're treating people in these socialized situations. It's just utterly, totally crazy. Let me apply libertarianism to one more issue that's now in the news, the minimum wage law. And then I'll stop and maybe have a little discussion, or we can have a discussion after we've all eaten. The minimum wage law, if you take a survey of, I have freshman students, and by the way, send your kids or your grandchildren to Loyola. At Tulane, there's only one libertarian professor. At LSU, there are none. How do I know this? Because I give speeches in those places, and I ask the kids, are there any libertarian professors? They say no. At Loyola, my whole economics department is all laissez-faire, capitalist, free enterprise, Austrian economists. And we've got 5, and we've got 2 or 3 other in the finance department. So if you want your kids to, look, we got pinkos too. Our sociology department, history, it's all pinkos. So they'll get that too, but at least they'll get some sort of free enterprise as well as at Loyola. The minimum wage law. Everyone thinks that the minimum wage law is sort of like a floor under wages, and the higher you raise the floor, the higher wages go. And that's why it's so popular, because it seems very callous to be against helping the poor by raising their wages. But that's not what the minimum wage law is. The minimum wage law is not an employment law. The minimum wage law is an unemployment law. The minimum wage law says right now, thou shalt not hire anyone at less than $7.25. And if it's raised to 10 or 15, then the law will be, if you raise it, if you pay less than 15, you go to jail. So it doesn't say you, and you have to hire you, and you. It just says you, and you can't hire you, and you unless you pay them more than the minimum wage. But if your productivity is $6 an hour and the minimum wage law is $9 an hour, you lose $3 an hour if you hire them. So of course you're not going to hire them. And of course unemployment rates are going to be much higher for unskilled workers with productivity levels below the minimum wage. Before the advent of the minimum wage, the unemployment rate for whites and blacks, young people and old people, was about the same. Now the unemployment rate for blacks is twice what it is for whites, and the unemployment rate for teenagers is twice what it is for adults. The unemployment rate for black teenagers is 4 times as much. Why? Because they have lower skills, and the analogy or the metaphor of a floor under wages is wrong. The right metaphor is a hurdle over which you have to jump to get a job. And the higher it is, the harder it is to jump up over the hurdle. Okay, I've now done what I was told to do. And why don't we take a break, and we'll have some lunch, and then we'll have some questions or discussion afterward.